Please be seated. My first week here at St. Paul's, I came up to the church one afternoon and walked around the church. Nobody was here, and walked through the narthex and read each one of the memorial plaques in the church. I prayed for those people that were remembered and wondered about their lives, how they connected with other people that they were remembered here in this place. And I thought how when we come together, they're all here. Whenever we come together in this place, they are all here. All that we bring, all those who have touched our lives, all those that we love. I was reminded of a story about a little boy at another memorial church who was reading all of these plaques in the narthex one Sunday morning, and the pastor comes in and says, "What you doing?" The little boy says, "What are all these names for?" He says, "Oh, those are the names of people who have died during the service." The little boy's eyes get really big, and he says, "Which one, the 8 or 10 o'clock?" He was onto it. He was onto it. Whatever we tell ourselves about why we come here, the reason we come here is to die. To die to our old selves and to become a new self. To die to our false selves and become our true selves. To die to who we once were so that we might be risen to this new life in Christ. It begins right here, at the waters of baptism, where new life is celebrated. And it's at these moments that we reach for something greater. We reach for transcendence, for the best of who we are and what could be and all of the possibilities. And we say there is more to this life than meets the eye. That's what we do at baptism, and we commit ourselves to pursuing it. And then it comes to an end here. What is left of our mortal bodies comes to this place, and we commit one another into the arms of love for all of eternity. It is that process in between there and here that we live and die a little bit each day, becoming who we are called to be. That is what's happening to St. Paul in these readings from today. We call this the feast day of St. Paul's conversion. I think that's misleading because it's not really a conversion. What is a conversion from? Judaism to Christianity? From one religion to another? Christianity didn't exist at the time. It took Paul to invent it. It's not that big of a move because Christianity was just this movement within Judaism at that time. What we're really talking about is Paul's surrender. About his surrender of his old life to become something new. Of letting go of control and trying to fix it and trusting in this love that he has just been introduced to. Saul, he was before this happened, and somehow after he became a Christian, he changed a letter in his name. But as Saul, he existed sometime maybe in the middle of the first century, roundabout. And he was a leader in the Jewish community. He was part of the leadership group called the Pharisees. And the Pharisees were very well-educated men. They were educated in the tradition of their elders. They had broad intellectual knowledge of the world and the way it worked. They had incredible cultural and political power. Even in the face of Roman occupation, they were able to exercise leadership for their people. They, as you know in the Gospels, were the Jesus debate partners over and over again. They could hold their own against Jesus. That's the quality of leadership that they had. Paul was an upcoming Pharisee, and he made it his mission to stamp out this talk about Jesus. You know, maybe it's just a young person trying to make it in their career, you can make it if you're against something, right? It's the oldest trick in the book. But there was something about this Jesus movement that was disturbing to him, because they were starting to whisper, it wasn't church and Christianity as we know it. It was talk, it was hints and allegations and gossip and innuendo and kind of searching for what this all meant. And they were telling one another, hey, I heard Jesus said this. Oh yeah, I heard that he did this. Well, I heard that he rose from the dead. Some people are saying that he's the son of David. Yeah, he might be this Messiah. And then they cross the line with the whispering that he might just be the Son of God. That was too much for Paul. So he went on an eradication campaign, and he tried to stop this speculation about Jesus. And one of the ways he did it was he threw people out of the synagogues who were talking about Jesus. What he did was he drew a boundary around the community. He said, if you're going to be a member, this is what that means, and if you're not, you're on the outside. He tried to control who was in and who was out. When there was violence against these Christians, they weren't Christians at the time, these Jesus followers, he was there approving of it. And when they fled from him, he pursued them. Paul was trying to control what people thought about God. He was trying to control their experience of the divine. He was trying to hem in this new expression of what it might mean to have a relationship with God. He hated these folks. That's where we pick up the story today. Some years later, he's before this king, Agrippa. He's been arrested. He's trying to plead his case, but what he does is he ends up telling a spiritual autobiography to this king. And he says to the king, as part of his testimony, he said, I was so furiously enraged at them, at these Jesus followers, that I pursued them even to foreign cities. So he's leaving Jerusalem, going north to Damascus to root the Christians, this Jesus believers, out of the synagogue. I don't know how he was going to do it. But as he's traveling, he tells Agrippa, I saw a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, shining around me and my companions. He sees this light. Is this a metaphor? Is it something that he sees? He sees this crackling and this sparkling of light all around him. What he is doing is seeing the luminosity of the world that he's never seen before. It's as if he has clarity. There is more to this world than meets the eye. He goes on to describe it. He says, when we had fallen to the ground, he hits his knees. He hits his knees and everybody with him. He says, when we had fallen to the ground, I heard a voice. I heard a voice. The light that he's seeing, this luminosity, starts to speak. The light has words. And he says that the light told me to turn from darkness to light. This light is inviting Paul to turn from control, to turn from control of his own experience, of other people's experience, to let go of trying to manage and fix it all, to let go of all of those tools that he thought were assets but were turning into his liabilities, to let all of it go and entrust himself to the light. This was Paul's moment of surrender. And he didn't get it right. This was not a one-time event, but it was the launching of a lifelong process. Because if you've read the rest of Paul's writings, you know, when the churches start to act up, he reaches back for that control. When they start having new experiences of God, he tries to lay down the law one more time. And yet, he can't let go of the light. No matter how troubling things get, he always wants to reach for the more. To be radically welcoming of everyone into this new light, this new love. Brian Eno is a musician, one of the great musicians of our time, powerful intellectual. He's a music producer. Come to think of it, I listen to Brian Eno almost every night before I go to bed. And he's produced some albums for the Irish rock band U2. And he was having this conversation with Bono, the lead singer, and he said, you know, I think that surrender is the most powerful word in the lexicon. And I've been thinking about that for a while. Surrender is the most powerful word. It's not that we surrender to those dark forces that are inside of us or around us that would control us. It's that we surrender to the light, to the love we've experienced with each other. We surrender to God, to a power greater than ourselves. I have a friend who's a drug addict and alcoholic, and the story's only going to make sense if you know that this is a very strong man. I mean, super strong and stubborn. And though I deeply respect his spirituality and love him to death, I also want to stay on the right side of him. It's like having a tamed lion in the house. Yeah, he's tamed, but he's still a lion. And he tells his story, and I love to hear him tell this story. He, many years ago, he committed a crime one night. There was a car chase, and he wrecked his car, and the police surrounded him, and he got out of the car, and he didn't have a weapon, so they did not use their weapons. About 5 or 6 police officers surrounded him. He was 6, 7 times over the legal limit of alcohol and jacked up on drugs, and he came out of that car fighting. And they surrounded him, and they tried to get him to the ground, but he wasn't going. He kept punching, and 2 of them pulled out their tasers, and one tasered him in the stomach, another one in the chest, and he still didn't go down. The third one hit him right on the back of the neck, shot right through his nervous system. And he says, in that moment where I lost control of my body, and in that second and a half as I'm free falling through the air, about to do a face plant on the pavement, a wave of relief came over me. It was over. I did not have to struggle. I did not have to fix it. I did not have to change it. I was going to entrust myself to God. He says, just as his face hits the blacktop, he sees a light. I tease him. I think that might have just been the blue light of the cop cars. But that was his moment of surrender. Talk about surrendering to this light. What are we talking about? I know that some of you will say, but I've never had an experience like that. I have never had one of these spiritual experiences, so I don't really belong here. I've heard you say that to me. But you have. Because I ask a couple more questions and I find out that you indeed have experienced this light of the world that will speak to you. Whenever you feel this desire to love another person, that is the light speaking to you. Whenever you want to reach out across a division or break down a barrier that separates you from another person or another group of people, that's the light speaking to you. When you feel this connection with the earth and you feel this oneness with the natural world, that's the light That's what Paul was seeing. It's speaking to you. When you let go of some of your defenses and open your heart to truly be vulnerable to others, that's the light speaking to you. When you realize that all of those things that you thought were assets, all of that ambition, all of that careerism, all of those things that you were trying to make happen, when you think in that split moment there might be more to life than all of that, that's the light speaking. When you feel these words churning deep down in your stomach, and they start to make their way up, and you try to push them down, but you know it's going to come out like vomit you cannot control, and you hear it coming out of your mouth. I need help. That is the light speaking to you. Each one of us has to ask ourselves the question, where is the light in my life? Where am I experiencing this light, and what is it calling me to do? Who is it calling me to be? This congregation, every congregation, has to ask itself, where is the light among us? Where do we experience this luminosity together, and who is it calling us to be? When I look at you, and remember the stories you've told me, when I look at you and think of the hopes and the hurts that you have shared with me, when I look at you and sense who you are and who you will become, when I look at you, I am blinded by the light that I see.